Hello everyone! For this Random Talk Sunday, I thought it would be interesting to discuss some of my favorite comedians. Now, I'm going to throw out there that I do enjoy a variety of comics, a variety of stand-up comics who do a variety of different performances. And so this is why I tried to compile a sort of diverse group of comics who kind of, I think, offer something a little bit different than what a traditional comic or stand-up comedian would do. So without further ado, let me discuss the ones that I think really stand out, and I'll be sure to put some links below to some of their stand-up or comedic forms of entertainment that they've done. But without further ado, let me discuss the first one. And the first stand-up comic that I really enjoy is Robin Williams. And Robin Williams was a person that I think had a lot of really positive energy up on stage. It seemed like he really enjoyed going up and doing a performance for people. He always wanted to make people smile or laugh. He seemed like one of those comics who really didn't take, I think, comedy all that seriously, which is sort of a breath of fresh air, because I think a lot of comedians like to put some serious, dark undertones in comedy. And Robin Williams, I don't think, was like that. I think he was more of a back-to-basics kind of goofy guy who just wanted to just go up on stage and make jokes and get the audience engaged. And I just think he had such a bubbling energy. It was probably like no other comic out there. It was just so fast, his jokes, and he would always seem to be wanting to stand out when he was doing his performances, and he would always try to throw everything that he could at you, and he puts so much heart, so much soul and passion into it that it was just so enjoyable to watch. And I think he will be remembered as one of the greats when it comes to comedy, because he just had this way of taking comedy and putting a very positive, lighthearted spin on it. Instead of putting in dark undertones or kind of cynicalness, he was just out there trying to make people happy and make people laugh, and just have this real, genuine connection with the audience. He always wanted to, I think, put on a performance so that other people could feel better, and all their stress and anxiety or whatever they had going on, they could release that tension. And I think when you see Robin Williams in his films, as well as when he does stand-up, you will see that kind of quick-paced energy that's just so positive. It's just so much fun to see this positive energy, this ability to uplift your audience rather than pushing them down. And I think that's just something that really stands out when it comes to his comedy and how he approaches comedy, because it's not necessarily the jokes. Usually when you look at comedians, they usually focus on similar topics, similar issues. There's really not a whole lot of variety as to what comedians talk about, but it's all based upon your personality and delivery. And I think there was just a lot of personality to Robin Williams, and that positivity and sort of optimism, I think, was really the personality that he showcased when he was performing, because it almost seemed like he felt like he was loved and respected when he was performing. And I think that energy really shows because he really does give it to the audience. He just had that ability to go out there and really work hard to prove that he could do this kind of comedy and showcase his talents. And I think it's such a breath of fresh air to see a comedian maintain this really high level of positivity and kind of address things in just a purely comedic matter, as opposed to trying to put in any deep cynicism or which is what you'll see in some of the comics that I'm going to be discussing. Sometimes when I'll watch one comic and they're fairly cynical, I often want to go just back to Robin Williams and just hear that very kind-hearted kind of positive energy that is just all designed on just making jokes and not designed on trying to be really deep, but rather deep on that energy and positivity. And I think that's just something that is very relatable. And that's why I think I identify with him as a comic, as someone who does comedy. So, yes, I think that's definitely why I would put him in this list of my favorite comedians. Now, the next one I'm going to briefly discuss is a lot different from, again, Robin Williams. He's pretty much the exact opposite, I'd say, of Robin Williams. Whereas Robin Williams was rather simplistic with his comedy, but he was very quick. And he was very just happy and just joyful up on stage. George Carlin is kind of the old grandpa or old uncle that you know. And what I mean by that is he's the exact opposite of Robin Williams in probably every sense of the word when it comes really to comedy, I'd say. Again, they might focus on similar issues, like they do discuss sometimes politics or whatever, but George Carlin had a very interesting way of approaching comedy. There was always some deep meaning going on whenever he was performing or on a stage. It was about making jokes, but it was also about like having people in the audience see the big picture. And see the kind of reality that underlines sort of the comedy underbelt. Also, George Carlin is a very calculative comedian. He mentioned something how he liked words. He liked how words flowed together, and he sort of liked focusing on putting in the right words, I think. And he liked openly, expressing words that weren't all that popular, especially during his heydays earlier on in life, when he was doing comedy and stand-up. And he really knows how to think things through in his mind. Whereas Robin Williams kind of just throws everything out there. George Carlin is just very calculative in what he says. And he's very cynical about it too. He's a deep cynic. He is not the upbeat-go-lucky comedy bubbling figure that Robin Williams was. George Carlin was rather more, I guess, just more down to earth on a certain level, but at the same time he knew how to execute jokes by being rather cynical and thinking through his comedy and his shows and what he would talk about, and he and he would always, add in that comedic bit of, putting in, various cuss words, or trying to kind of be the cool, grumpy grandpa. And he works for that, because that's really who George Carlin, I think, was as a person, similar to how Robin Williams was very bubbly and, kind and upbeat. George Carlin was a rather cynical person in real life. I mean, I would say he's I think a lot more approachable when he's not going up there and doing stand up, because I think when he's doing stand up, he has this certain way of thinking, and he likes to present that to everybody. But when you're having a conversation with him, you do feel like that he is trying to get people to see things through his perspective, but I think he's a little bit less. I don't know if arrogant would be the right word, but I think I just think he's a little bit more approachable and less intimidating in real life when he was actually doing interviews, as opposed to when he was on stage and he was, kind of presenting himself as a really deep cynic. And he has a lot of interesting commentary on various things, and his comedy, I think, does make people think to a certain level. And that's, I think, rather unique compared to Robin Williams' comedy, who's kind of all over the place and is just designed to be more about the jokes rather than sort of the really deeper underlying context. And I think George Carlin was really about context and really about giving words meaning, and that's really what he focused his comedy on trying to be, was this kind of cynical approach, but doing it in a very ranty kind of raging style, but in that style that we all see, because we know that there's some people who are maybe a little bit more cynical than others and see things through a more cynical lens as opposed to a more optimistic lens compared to like Robin Williams. So again, you really do see the differences between these two comics in particular, and George Carlin really stands out to me when he does rant about things that I think are very, 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 very true to our society. And I think he really focused a lot of his comedy on society in particular, and things relating to society and to just people in general. I don't think he would really hone in so much on one person. Maybe he would do that sometimes, but I feel like he liked expressing the sort of problems within society and kind of putting his own unique opinion spin on it, and at the same time try to add in jokes to make people laugh. And that was sort of his whole approach, and it's a very interesting approach. It's a very different approach, but again, I enjoy both cynicism and optimism within comedy. So he's definitely, I think, one of the greats, and will go down as one of the greats, like Robin Williams too. The third comic that I'm going to be brief discussing is Dave Chappelle, who did the Chappelle Show, which was actually really popular back in the 90s. The interesting thing about Chappelle, unlike George Carlin, who was sort of cynical, and Robin Williams, who was very upbeat-go-lucky energy, Dave Chappelle seems probably like the most, I don't really want to say ordinary, but he does seem to be the most down-to-earth, I think, out of all the comics that I'll be mentioning on this list. He approaches comedy in a very kind of laid-back tone. He just kind of, acts like he's having a conversation with the audience. It doesn't feel like he's trying to put on a performance, because he doesn't really, he just kind of lets the words sort of speak for themselves. And again, he does sort of have more of a simplistic approach when it comes to comedy and jokes, but he does try to paint some sort of context surrounding what he's talking about. The interesting thing about Dave Chappelle is he was very popular. He got very, very popular, and I don't think he actually does comedy anymore. But I think the comedy that he did, along with his show, which was actually very interesting and insightfully funny, and also commenting on various different things and addressing similar things that other comics did, I think worked to his advantage because he presented it in a fairly, I think, just down-to-earth, unique approach, as opposed to other comics who really try to go for the performance. They really try to go for trying to create a character or trying to create some kind of persona. And I think Dave Chappelle was just himself up there. I think he was just totally just laid back, just like, yeah, this is me, and these are the jokes that I'm going to make tonight, so hope you'll laugh a little bit. That's kind of how I feel he really addressed comedy, and he really took a lot of different subject matters, and he did something, I think, creative with it, especially when you watch, in particular, his show. You will see that there was a lot of little creative bits that they had in there where he would make fun of various things and comment on various things throughout the show. So it was an interesting blend, the show, and his stand-up is also really well done too. So he has a lot of things to offer as a comedian, I believe, and he was successful. Unfortunately, I guess he didn't really keep it going, and he's no longer doing it anymore, but I still think that he'll go down as one of the greats who really impressed a lot of people, who I think even today a lot of people remember Dave Chappelle when he was popular, and remember the various things that he did throughout his comedic life. And I think overall he was just a very very down-to-earth guy who just kind of told it how things were, and then sort of made little skits to kind of go along with what he was thinking about when it comes to certain issues. And again, I think just the overall presentation was well done, both in his stand-up as well as within his show. But I think that's really all I can say about Dave Chappelle. The fourth one that I wanted to briefly address is Louis C.K. I think he still does his spiel, and he has actually a show too, I think called Louis. I'm not sure how popular it is, but it's kind of supposedly supposed to be really random and just, just kind of follows a guy's day, and that guy's day being Louis C.K.'s day, since technically the show is all about him. And I think Louis C.K. really likes to tell stories. I think his better comedies, comedic bits, are when he's addressing a story that like happened to him, and what he really likes to do is he really likes to paint a picture for people. When you see Louis C.K. standing up there and he's like doing this with his hands, and he's talking, and there's just a lot of energy and sort of positivity that comes out through there, and I feel like people laugh more at that kind of approach. And he presents it with such an enthusiasm too. It's just like, yeah, I did this today, and blah blah blah, and or he'll just go on and on about the story, and oh yeah, I went to a coffee shop, and there was this here, and then you had this here, and and then I went up to, when he does this kind of spiel where he's literally trying to paint a picture for the audience when he's doing his stand-up routine, it's really energetic, it's really fun, and I seem to to laugh a lot more, because I think he's very, very good at bringing out that kind of picture for people to think about the scenario that he's addressing within his comedy. I find it to just be funny too, because I think that positive energy really creates a lot of likability to the comic. But again, unlike Robin Williams, who is way, way, way on overdrive when he's just doing his spiel, Louis C.K. is still reserved enough to kind of, be a little bit more slower. Again, he kind of, when he talks, it's not really like da 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 da. It's more like da 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 da. He'll just he addresses it in a fairly natural and normal way, and is not as quick or as fast paced as Robin Williams was. But he does provide, I think, an interesting take on presenting comedy in this picturesque sort of way, because he does like to tell these kinds of stories. He does like to put a story on things, and I think that story really allows him to really bring out the full expressions, bring out the full emotions behind the comedy that he's trying to talk about. And again, he also is a little bit cynical too, so he kind of has this sort of blend, I think, like George Carlin, and like George Carlin's comedy as well as Robin Williams' comedy. He kind of had this interesting blend of the two, I think, where he has this positive, happy energy and a positive, funny story, and then he'll sometimes have sort of a negative, sort of funny story, that has this underlying cynicism to it. But he is, I think, fairly interesting, and I think he'll be around for a while. And I think he has maintained some significant popularity and has been around for a while. So, Louis C.K., if you are interested, definitely check him out. Now, the last one that I will be briefly addressing is Bill Burr. Bill Burr is very, very interesting, to say the least. Bill Burr is funny because he has that very unique, East Coast, attitude. He presents that constantly throughout his stand-up. He looks at things through that perspective, and I think through that kind of culture, you could say, because the way people on the East Coast of the United States, I think, interact is a lot different than how we in California interact. And then maybe do comedy too. I don't know, because on the East Coast, people are very, very fast-paced. They're loud. They're very quick. They have a very straightforward attitude. They like to get things done. I think there's this like kind of East Coast perspective of, okay, we want to get things done. We're not just sitting around here. We're actually going to go through something, and we're going to accomplish that. And in California, a lot of people are a lot more easygoing and are very positive. I would say like that's kind of a difference. I mean, it's not to say that not everybody on the East Coast has that kind of mentality, but I think it's a more traditionally it's more associated of the East Coast being more more a lot more faster talking, a lot more how do you say just a lot more focused on getting a job done, not really necessarily the most laid back culture. Whereas California, it's definitely laid back. It's like, yeah, I'm just gonna watch the beach and I'm just gonna sit here and enjoy my time. It's okay. We're gonna get through this, and there's a lot of positivity, and it's just a very smooth culture, and the East Coast's culture, I think, is a lot more rigid and a lot more just, it's just a different mentality and a different mindset. And I'm not saying that these cultures are somehow completely defined within where you live in the United States, but again, I think I'm just more generally speaking. Because he does seem to identify himself with that culture. So he has that East Coast attitude. He's really loud. He's very loud. He kind of has a similar cynical approach, kind of like George Carlin does. But with the thing too is he is a lot more, I think, direct than George Carlin is. He says things like it is in comedy. Like, when he's talking and he has his hand like this and he's just like, this is how it is, and da 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 da, like this is how and he kind of lays down the law, so to speak. He kind of just tells things how they are. And then at the same time, he just kind of goes back and, realizes, oh, maybe these people don't have the similar opinion that I do, but all he has really to say to that is I'm just saying, that's just how it is. I'm just saying, they're just saying, he just has this interesting way of kind of coming off as going, yeah, I'm not really being serious, but at the same time, I'm still expressing some underlying truth here, where you have to agree with me a little bit. And so there's this whole mentality that he has, and it's very interesting. It's very, it's just very unique, and I think that's what makes him stand out. He's a lot more just boom in your face, like, I'm coming at you with a joke, and you're going to listen to what I have to say, but at the same time, all he says is, I'm just saying, this is just how it is, that's just how it is, after he says his jokes. So, he just has a really funny way of approaching it, I think. He also has a podcast, I think, that he does where he helps out people with various problems. If you have any issues, kind of similar to what Adam Carolla does. If you like that kind of comedy, I think Adam Carolla would probably be a little bit similar to Bill Burr. I think they're actually kind of all in the sort of same circle. At least a lot of the comedians that I mentioned are probably in the similar circle. But I think, though, that's really ultimately all I can say about these comedians. But I will put some of their content below so that you can check them out for yourself, and check out the ones that you enjoy. But I think that's really all I can really say about all of them. But with that, if there are any questions, comments, concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them. But I think that's really ultimately all I can say. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you all have a pleasant day, week, month, and year. And I hope to see you all in the next video. And I'm sure from now on everything will run smoothly from here on out. So expect to get a video every single day. But take care, and I hope you enjoyed this video and the next ones to come.